Hello and welcome.
Hi.
Evie Suarez is with us today, and we're going to discuss healthy culture, happy teams. Literally one of my favorite topics. So I'm so excited to be here with you. Evie, let's start off with tell me a little bit about tell me a lot about yourself. Tell us about your organization, who you are, your background.
Absolutely. So I'm Evie Suarez. I am a first generation professional, and I started a company called WorkWise Guide. So I help organizations as a fractional HR consultant, helping them with strategy, helping them with any workshops that they have for their leaders and things of that nature. But I also have a heart for first generation professionals and helping them grow in the workplace. There's a lot of challenges that first generation professionals experience in the workplace. So for me, I'm very passionate about helping them grow and succeed. I've spent about 12 years in HR of various different industries, a lot of it in manufacturing, but also had a stint in Macy's corporate retail, which was so much fun working in Herald Square, New York City, right in the middle of the hustle and bustle was so much fun. And then also for property management. So HR all around corporate, manufacturing, et cetera. But organizational culture and making sure teams are engaged, I am super passionate about. I think it's really what drives an organization, and I'm a little biased because I'm an HR professional, but I do believe it is tied to the bottom line.
Totally agree with your last statement and want to drill down on a couple other things you said. But I think happy, healthy organizations, all of them have lower turnover than companies that don't, which in the end absolutely ties back to the bottom line.
Right.
Some people, and I know you've heard it, right? Oh, that's touchy-feely.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is it makes a big difference on the ROI.
Right.
And the P&L, right?
Right.
So I'm so glad you said that. Okay, you said something that I've never heard before. Okay. I get it, but I want to circle back on it.
Yeah.
You said first gen professional.
Yes.
And so I know I get what that means, but
Right.
tell me what that means.
Right. So just the first person in my family to embark on a professional career. So I was also the first in my family to get a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, et cetera, but also the first person to come into corporate America. That comes with a lot of challenges. You don't have anybody at home to ask for advice when it comes to accepting a job offer, negotiating a job offer, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just very passionate about it. I had to endure a lot of things and I had to overcome a lot of things. And I want to help people that are in my community and help them grow through it.
That is awesome. I love that. Obviously, you hear a lot of first gen.
Yes.
I'm first generation in the United States, especially in
Right.
Gwinnett. I'm first gen on my mom's side. She wasn't born in the U.S.
Yeah.
My father's second gen, so I'm third gen there. But I have three older brothers, and they all work with their hands. They're laborers. Every day, I'm the only one to get a college degree.
Right.
My father had an associate's degree. So I didn't know that about you. And so we have that in common.
Yes.
And it's my father is a corporate executive. So I never thought getting a college degree was even a choice. Like that was, you're going to get a high school diploma and you're going to go to college.
Right.
And my brothers just didn't pick up that same vibe, I guess.
Yeah.
But I did, and I think it was the high school I went to. And those things all have they're super impactful
Right.
and influential. And you are all those firsts. And it's a little bit of pressure too, right? You
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, everyone's looking at you, right?
Right.
Well, that's very cool. I'm so glad you shared that, and I'm glad I learned that about you. Well, let's just starting off the conversation. Creating a healthy workforce culture. Can you explain what do you mean by that within an organizational structure?
So organizational culture is really made up of the shared values of all the individuals that are part of the team. And
Hold on,
you know,
it's not just this, whatever the CEO wants.
oh, I know, right? It's not. And that's the fascinating part about organizational culture. It's not something that's a one and done. You can never just think, I set the organizational culture, I'm walking away, I'm done now. Everything is good and it's going to be great for the next 10 years. There's a lot of factors that influence organizational culture. Just the conversation we were just having about being a first gen. You know, how many first gens do you have in your company? What does that look like? What do they come with into the organization about how they grew up and the different passions that they have, the different things that they're interested in? All of that adds to the organizational culture. And as we know, organizations change a lot. People come in and out of the organization, and also people change individually. People become parents and they have families now, right? So now their priorities change and they want different things out of the organization than maybe they wanted 3 years ago. So all of that by itself is shaping the organization little by little. And as a leader, it's important to always have your head in the game when it comes to organizational culture and understanding what's happening with my people, what's happening with the team. Did I lose a really big key player when it comes to driving organizational culture? Do I have a really big detractor in my organization when it comes to organizational culture? And what does that mean? And what am I doing about it? You know, you can never take your eyes off the road when it comes to organizational culture. It's an ever-evolving organism that you just need to pay attention to at all times.
So it's almost like you're, in a way, your car. Yes. You got to go and get a service check. It's like your annual checkup when you get a physical.
Right.
But just because it was good a year ago doesn't mean it's good now.
Exactly. I like to cook a lot. So I compare it to when you're making a recipe, right? You can throw a lot of things into a soup. But if you start throwing things and you don't really know how it tastes and you don't taste it every few minutes and you don't really understand how the flavors are starting to meld together, if you walk away for 30 minutes, that soup is going to taste really different later on, right? So it's paying attention to it and never taking your eyes off of what you're actually doing.
Evie, I cannot believe you used the example of a soup. I said physical checkup, car repair, but you used soup, which interestingly enough, as I interview people, I tell them how important our culture is at the Gwinnett Chamber. And I probably have said this to almost every employee if I'm involved in the interviewing process. I say, we have a beautiful soup, gazpacho, it doesn't matter. Just imagine, just a delicious thing.
Right.
And you are a new ingredient into our soup.
I love it.
And I said, and we know it's going to change because you're a different person.
Yes.
And it's okay if it changes. I just don't want it to taste bad.
I love it.
Bring your authentic self, but I want a positive attitude.
Yeah.
Choose your attitude.
Right.
I want your glass half full.
Right.
I want enthusiasm.
Right.
And if that doesn't sound like you, this is probably not the soup for you.
Right.
And I'm curious on how many people that have currently worked. If I've interviewed you, you've heard that.
We need to write a book. It's going to be called What's in the Soup. Come on.
Well,
now.
we have a lot in common already. This is a great new friendship. Well, I thank you for explaining that. I think it's super important. I think organizational culture, like a lot of terms, can mean different things to different people. So today, what role does leadership play in developing culture in our organization? And I think you kind of addressed it, but maybe expound on that.
I think leaders have certain priorities when they come into an organization. And I think it's understanding, are we building a culture from scratch, i.e. an entrepreneur that's starting a new organization that's adding people to a brand new team? Am I coming into an organization that's already stable and, already has employees, has already developed their values, et cetera, et cetera? What is the leader coming to do? That's the first question, right? And once the leader understands what they're coming to do, then they can put certain priorities in action. So if in a manufacturing environment, a leader really cares about safety, the leader needs to make it a priority at all times. You can't just say that you care about safety. You can't just say you care about safety and then not be the first thing that you bring up every single town hall. Just because you had bad numbers when it comes to your costs and your productivity, it doesn't matter because safety is what you said is your priority. If it's not your priority, then don't say it because people will know it. And I think it's very important for the leader, and it's very difficult to stay true to what your actual priorities are, what the values are that you're pushing for the organization to go towards when it comes to organizational culture. And the leader needs to be patient because certain things don't happen overnight, especially when we're talking about culture. You need to slowly be hiring people that align to those values that you really feel like you're pushing towards for the culture. But you also need to understand that you are not the only thing that makes the culture. Your direct team, the leader's direct team, is a huge influence over the organization. Might even be a bigger influence than the leader themselves because they have a little bit more of authority over the organization. They have a lot more representation when it comes to the organization. A manufacturing leader has 300 people reporting up into them, and they set the tone for those 300 individuals. Maybe the leader doesn't have as close of a relationship with some of those individuals. And I think it's important for the leader to understand that they need to develop their next level to have the same priorities. And if their next level doesn't, then they're never going to be able to influence the culture at the next level or the next level after that.
Hey guys, I'm David Greer, and I'm the publisher of the Guide to Gwinnett, and we are so excited this year to be working with the Chamber to produce what we think is going to be the biggest, best, most comprehensive Guide to Gwinnett ever. Going to be a lot of pages in there that tout the Chamber's services and basically just a pro-business cheer for all you guys out there working day to day, making Gwinnett what it is. So I invite all of you to step up and advertise. We've got some special deals for Chamber members, exclusive deals, special discounts. Call on us if we can help you. Look forward to having you in this year's Guide to Gwinnett.
So Evie, you talked about the manufacturing example. I actually have a background in manufacturing as well on the staffing side. Yeah. I was in the recruiting temporary staffing industry for 12 years. Okay. And for about 5 of those years, it was almost strictly in manufacturing. Yeah. And I was blown away by the CEO or the president, the top person in that plant manager, actually. They would walk through, he or she would walk through, I'd walk through it with them. And I was blown away when there was, and this was not always, but the really good leaders knew people by name.
Oh, yeah.
And there's 200, 300, 400 people in the factory, or it's 3 shifts.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know, I'm not great with names. And so I didn't know how they could do it. But you knew they understood what was going on with the culture, the connectivity back to the staff. Right. They could tell you what the challenges were. And I love when you said, if you say you're concerned about safety, talk about it. And it can't just be a flash in the pan type thing. It can't be the issue of the hour. It's got to be consistent, especially when, like, I can't even imagine leading an organization that has hundreds of employees. Right. I'm a person I like to connect with people. Yeah. I don't know how you do that with 300, 400 employees. But really, really good advice. Okay, we talked about leaders. What about employees? So we as employees, we make up the organization. We play a vital role in the organization and in the culture. So let me hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think it's employees first understanding that they bring a culture to an organization. Employees have their own shared values at home with their group of friends in the different activities that they do for recreation, whatever it might be. They're all bringing some kind of culture into the organization. And I think it's important to first know you're bringing something to this organization. And that also helps confidence because you feel like you're adding to something. You're adding to the soup, right? You're doing something. And once you understand that you're bringing value, then at that point you can understand what value is it that I bring and does it mix in well with what the organization is looking for. I would say to employees, if you interview for an organization and it really doesn't align to what you're looking to do, if it doesn't align with your values, don't work there. And I think it's very important because sometimes, we want to make an income, we want to make sure that we grow our career, we want that title, we want that salary, whatever it might be. But if an organization doesn't line up with the culture that you currently have or the culture that you're hoping to get to at some point, something is going to go wrong. There's going to be some kind of misalignment between you and your direct manager. There's going to be some kind of misalignment with you and the expectations that you have for the organization, and you're going to feel like you're not getting enough in return. And I think employees, when you're interviewing for organizations, you need to be very self-aware. Who am I? What do I bring to the table? And is this the right place for me? And if it's not, that's perfectly okay. There's millions of organizations out there, or you can create your own, right? Or in the entrepreneurship world, you can definitely do that. But I think it's being self-aware and knowing that you are also adding to this huge soup.
So well said. I think that aligns with a lot of companies. They're trying to drive a culture, but probably one of the greatest things I've heard in regards to employee culture is someone said to me, well, the culture is the employee's culture. And that when I read that or heard that, it was probably a podcast. And the next time someone that I had a meeting with had a concern about the culture, I said, well, it's all of our cultures. Right. This is our culture. It's the organization's culture. What do you recommend? Right. And I think a common thing in my leadership in the previous 2 decades is they would say, there's an issue with the culture and it's X. And then I would go to try to fix X. Right. But then when you're inviting them in to help fix it with you. Yeah. That's what I heard you say. Yes. And I think that's brilliant because it's ownership. Right. Because there is not an employee in the organization that isn't responsible for some level of the culture. Absolutely. Because it's all what we bring every day. Absolutely. And that sense of shared is really fantastic. And I think you could end up with the best, maybe not the best, a better culture, right? And always improving culture.
Absolutely. But I also think there's a piece of it where If you're looking to grow an organization and you're adding people into your organization, it's also about taking action as a leader and knowing when something has gone off with either your priorities or your values or whatever you're bringing to the table to push that culture forward. When something goes wrong and somebody's not adding to that culture, the action that you take is going to influence not just that person, but everybody else around because they're watching you. And they're watching you not just, not bringing up safety when it comes to town halls, but if you have somebody that goes against the culture and has a misconduct in the organization, it doesn't matter if they're a great performer. Are you taking action accordingly? And I think if you don't take action, everybody else is watching and saying, oh, okay, well, I guess that's allowed here. I guess this is our new place, and I guess that's okay. And then other people start doing certain things, and things, again, it's an evolving organism. And if you don't have your eyes on the road, you're not going to see what's happening and the actions that you're taking or the actions that you're not taking to influence the organization.
That is great advice because everyone's always watching. What I have found is that you make a hiring decision. Maybe you hired from outside the organization, or maybe you promoted someone that wasn't ready for that leadership role.
Right.
And the longer you let bad leadership, bad management fester, everyone's watching, everyone knows. And this is a term that I probably learned 20 years ago, which is just admit it's a fast failure.
Right.
Just pull the Band-Aid off and either remove the person from the organization, give them an opportunity to maybe explore going back to their original role. All that's okay, but it's way worse just to let it go and let it fester. It's the wrong person in the wrong position.
Right.
And as long as you do it with humility and grace and respect with them and the rest of the employees. But I have found the quicker you just acknowledge, no one's expecting you to hire the right person every time. No. They do expect you to identify, coach, and then remove the problem as quick as possible.
Right.
And even though it's painful, because then you have to start that whole recruiting process over again.
Yes.
It's really the right thing.
Right.
Because sometimes don't be worried about the recruiting and the person you're going to hire. You got to worry about the people that are there, that are leading the organization. And so we've all experienced that. And it only took me 30 years, probably 25, but I've really tried to lead with that as a thought process, as a value of mine.
Yeah.
It's okay. No one's going to, if anyone's hiring 100% of the right people, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd like to know who they are. The answer is it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
So,
and I love that you said admitting, because you admit whatever you're admitting, the words that you're using is going to impact the organization. But just the fact that you admitted a mistake, that is influencing the organization. Because a huge piece about culture is if you aren't creating a space where people have psychological safety, then regardless of how many surveys you have for engagement, regardless of how many times you ask people, what else can we do to improve things, people are not going to voice their true opinion. Because maybe people are afraid that you care more about numbers than you care about people. And your actions, they do speak louder than words. And if you say things to people when they're at meetings and you call them out, and they're not expecting you to call them out in a meeting because they didn't hit their numbers and you made them feel embarrassed, that's how people are going to feel, and then they're never going to do certain things to voice their opinion for improvements. And if you don't have those opportunities for people to be transparent and people to communicate, then you're never going to get the ideas, you're never going to get the benefits of the shared values that you potentially have in the organization. So if you start with that psychological safety and people know that they can raise their hand and things are going to be okay, then the next level is taking action. And when you can't take action on something, tell them. I love that idea. Unfortunately, we just don't have the budget for that right now. I love that idea. Maybe it's something we could do in the next 6 months. Work with this leader and maybe we can implement it. Always have feedback to whatever ideas people are surfacing. I'll tell you a great story that we had at one of my manufacturing plants. We had about 1,000 employees at the site. And turns out we had 43 different birth countries represented at the site.
Gosh.
Wow. It was insane. And, we used to have our town halls, and we had about 9 or 10 town halls throughout the day because, our cafeteria was only big enough to fit a certain amount of employees. And we had certain translators come in. Our second biggest language spoken at the site was Spanish, so we always had a Spanish translator come in. That was always the case even before I started working there, which was fine. But at one town hall, at some point, somebody raised their hand and said, why don't you have somebody that translates into Swahili? I care about what's going on in the organization. I want to know, and I want to hear it in my language. I don't want to hear it through a telephone conversation, through somebody that maybe understands half of what you said. So what did we do? we brought in translators to speak the languages. But before that, we first said, wow, we have all these different countries represented. Let's do a survey. Let's figure out where our people were born. Let's care about what our people are bringing to the table. Where are they born? So we put up 43 flags in our cafeteria.
That's cool.
So people could see that they were being represented. And then people started to ask questions. Oh, what flag is that? And there was a conversation started in the cafeteria where people were able to communicate better with each other by simply putting up a flag. And then at that point, we were able to bring translators. And then we got to the point where we had 9 translators going on at the same time as a plant manager speaking all these different languages for these 9 sessions throughout the day. It was amazing. It was incredible. And people felt valued. And we listened. We took action on what somebody said.
And that's amazing. I'm blown away. Were they live translating?
Yes.
So so it's not like there were 9 people talking. The plant manager wouldn't speak, and then somebody else would.
No.
They were on their own device.
Yes.
Okay, I've experienced that before. It's really interesting.
It was groups. They were all spread out, and then the plant manager was speaking. The translator would hear, and there would be like a 10-second delay. However,
Right.
translation works. Everybody had headphones, and they were listening to their specific language, and they were listening to what the plant manager was actually saying, which was what was actually important.
That's great. That is not happening.
Yeah.
Almost probably anywhere.
Right.
So in regards to creating a place where people feel welcomed and
Right.
healthy and safe,
Right.
Connected, cared about,
Right.
That's pretty amazing. No, that was your idea, wasn't it?
It was a combination. My team was amazing there.
I'm giving you credit
and they definitely wanted to help with that. And we wanted to answer. The plant manager was also amazing. He was fantastic. And he wanted to implement. When you have an employee that cares that much and raises their hand to say something like that, how can you not take action? How can you not pay attention and say, let me help them understand what's going on in the business, because they actually want to help.
Well, they feel part of it, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're connected to it.
Right.
And then create that environment, I guarantee that reduced turnover.
Right.
Which is that ROI.
Yes,
Right.
Exactly. Especially in manufacturing.
Yes, right. That's how they measure everything in manufacturing.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you share, for those of us who are looking to grow our teams, what are the top 3 things employees are looking for in workplace culture today? What's the themes you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the themes are flexibility. I think flexibility is very important. After COVID, I think people are starting to explore what flexibility can look like in our world. I don't think there's one solution for anything. I think part of it is the organization understanding what are we here to do? What is our goal in the organization? How do we make money? How do we grow? How do we expand our organization? And then out of that, understanding what can we be flexible with? What's possible for our organization? And then being crystal clear about that. That's very important, because if you lead somebody to believe that you're going to be more flexible than you actually are, then unfortunately you're signing them up for a situation where there's going to be tension. So I think once you understand that, communicating that to the organization, and it might change, and I think that's okay, because after COVID, things are always up in the air and things are very confusing. But I think it's being crystal clear about where we stand today. Today, this is what, our flexibility is. Tomorrow, it might be different, but we will communicate to you when tomorrow gets here. I think the second thing that employees are looking for is organizations that care about their development. I think things like young professionals organizations, something like all the organizations in the Gwinnett area, they should have somebody in the GYP. They should have somebody going through that series, because it's showing your team member that you care about them and you care about their development. It's a fantastic program, for one, but it's also an opportunity for them to be involved with the community, for them to network with other people in the community, for them to be part of the chamber, and then also for them to grow. And if they don't, stay with your organization for a long time, it could be a great story where they come back 5 years later because now they've gotten experience somewhere else. And I think it's important for you to show as a leader that you care about the employee. You don't just care about what they're bringing to the table when it comes to your organization. You care about them as a person and their development and their career. And I think when you do that and you do it in a genuine way, people will see that. And I think that's where, things like loyalty come in. There's mentorships, where people actually believe that somebody else cares about me and cares about my growth. And maybe they'll work with you in another organization, or maybe they'll come back later on. And I think the third thing is communication. And I think communication can take many different angles. I think one is communicating on your values, communicating on where you stand in the business. There's a lot of things going on in the world with layoffs and reductions and things of that nature. And I think from a leader, organizations' employees are looking for transparency. don't just surprise us that something else is going on. Don't tell us the numbers are fantastic, and then when it comes to fourth quarter, all of a sudden we're seeing, cuts in benefits or things of that nature. We want to be able to understand what's going on so that we can make our own decisions as individuals, because we have families to feed. We have things to do. We have our own lives that we have outside of the organization. And if you're sharing what's going on internally, then at least I can make my own decisions. The worst part is where you feel like you don't have autonomy to make your own decisions for your own life because you didn't know what was standing, on the other side in the organization. So if leaders are transparent, they're communicating what's going on, they're, as crystal clear as possible, but they're also open to, I make mistakes. Sometimes, the communication that I have is not perfect, but I'm trying to communicate as much as possible. People value that. People see that.
I heard flexibility,
Yeah.
but with clarity.
Yes.
Professional development.
Yes.
You made some recommendations, which we're going to review in a second.
Yes.
And then communication.
Yes.
I agree. I don't think you can over communicate, but be transparent about what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my rough nutshell. Okay.
Perfect.
Totally agree with the flexibility. Basically, have guardrails.
Yes.
Right. Bounce around between those guardrails. Yeah. But be clear on what you can and can't do. Right. I think as leaders, people can, in organizations, they can over create rules.
Right.
And things change, and you need to just because that was the policy then, keep communicating. I want to talk about the professional development. I think there has never been a time in the work history that development is so important. That was always considered an executive thing 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
Now every employee should have a development plan, no matter what level they are. You were referring to, I think, the Journey program,
Yes.
the Gwinnett Young Professionals 9-month program.
Yes.
Are you a graduate of it?
I am not, but I've heard amazing things about it, and I've met great people that are a part of it.
I am convinced you could teach it based on what I've heard today. But it is a fantastic program, and I'm really impressed. That is a real passion of the Gwinnett Chambers, has been. It predates me, that we have to be relevant to the next generations. And we've started and stopped and started and tweaked, never stopped, just tweaked. Yeah. But I really think that the Journey program that was set up about 4 years ago and rebranded to Journey, they really have hit it. It's a really sharp program. But I also want to just take a moment to point out some other programs. Yeah. And again, like for our entry-level staff that are new with us, we always recommend Glance, which is through the Leadership Gwinnett program. And it's not developing them as much as it is connecting them in the community. And it's part of Leadership Gwinnett. They do it twice a year. And actually this week, it's a full day on Wednesday, Thursday, and a half a day on Friday. And you just learn kind of how the community works, make great connections. There's usually 35 to 50 people in each class. But then the mega program is Leadership Gwinnett, which is the 9-month program, much more intense than Journey or Glance. And we try to put someone through the Gwinnett Chamber through it every year. I was in the 2011 class. And the connections I made there were just invaluable. Actually, my chair of the Gwinnett Chamber, Lanier Levitt, and I met through Glance. Wow. Sorry, through Leadership Gwinnett. One of my board members, Matt Hyatt, was in my class. Just really fantastic people. But find that program. I mean, right. The county has the county 101. A lot of the cities have 101s. So find a program, get connected. Right. And the message is for the employers. If one of your employees aren't taking one of these programs, go discover what's in them. Have them join Rotary or Kiwanis Club. Right. They've got to connect. You get so much out of those development programs. Communication, your third one. Mm-hmm. I could not agree with you more on communication, and specifically the transparency. It's to not see something coming, and typically, unless it's completely out of the control of the organization, that you can understand. I mean, you're all getting the information at the same time. But if there's plans and strategies, you should communicate what you're doing. It's also an employment opportunity, right? Maybe someone's interested in a new role, trying something new. That should be part of their development plan. Shadowing, so many great opportunities. Again, flexibility, professional development, and communication. Yeah. Fantastic. Really, really great advice. And that's not always the question was, what's the trend, right?
Yeah.
So that's the trend today. It's, the end of Q3 of 2024. In a year, it could be a different set of three things.
Right.
I can't imagine these things dramatically changing, but things do change. It definitely, these were not the things 10 years ago. They would have rolled their eyes at you. Can you imagine an employee saying, I need more communication and transparency? It just wouldn't happen. But these are great today in the moment that we are in today. So what advice do you have for business leaders looking to impact their organization's cultures? I mean, you've given great advice. Yeah. I don't even know if it was advice, but if they were just listening, there's some great nuggets in there. But what are your thoughts?
I would say do a self-assessment and understand how engaged you are with the organization. I think you can only do so much to affect an organization if you are not honest with yourself about where you stand. I think if you started the organization, you're probably very passionate about it, and the team that you're leading, probably has the culture that you try to immerse into it. But if you are new to an organization, or if you have been part of an organization for 5 to 10 years and you've been leading it, do a self-assessment and see how you feel about it. Are you engaged? Because you're also an employee, right? So are you engaged with the organization and the direction the organization is going in? Because if you are, then you can be doing things that will trickle down into the organization to affect the culture. But if you're not engaged, then we need to figure out, what do we need to do differently? Are there things that we need to do so that we can improve our own engagement? Do we need to talk to our leaders so that we can get more professional development or more mentorship or whatever else it is that we need? Or do we need to make a change? Do we need to be working in another organization that better aligns with our values? Because early on in this conversation, I talked about how we change as people. And the person that we were 5 or 10 years ago might not be the leader that we are today. Maybe we outgrew our organization, and maybe we need to raise our hand, and maybe we need to lead a bigger site instead of the site that we're currently leading, and maybe it's time to make a change. I think it's important for leaders to do a self-assessment continuously, because if you don't, you might get to a place of burnout. And I think once you experience burnout, it's very, very difficult to remedy those things. And the sad part about it is that your employees will feel the burnout probably before you do, before you realize what's going on. And it's important for you to be self-aware so that you can catch those situations and you can make changes accordingly. And have a transparent communication culture where people will tell you, hey, something's off with you today. Is everything okay? How many organizations can you walk into where you can see somebody from the shop floor tapping their plant manager and saying, hey, is everything okay today? You're not looking your normal self. But if you have that transparent culture, then you will have those employees stopping you and asking you those questions. And that's what's important, creating that kind of culture around you.
So talk to me about the self-assessment. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? You're a leader of an organization. Where do you go? How do you do it? What does it look like?
I think it's first understanding, do I align with the values of this organization? Do I align with where this organization is going in the near term and in the long term? Do I feel like this is an organization where I can communicate and I can voice my opinion and I can actually drive change? Do I feel happy in my current role as the leader, CEO, the plant manager, whatever it is? Do I feel happy in that current space and in that role? And what I'm doing every day, am I happy with that? And if you are, then you might be engaged in your organization. But if you're not, and you're not feeling like those ideas of innovation are coming and that excitement to wake up every day and go to work and really bring your value forward, then something is off. And it doesn't always mean you need to make a drastic change, but it might just mean you need to start thinking about what can you implement into your routine, what can you implement into your organization so that you can start changing some of these things.
Really interesting. I think of leaders, I don't know that they're always self-reflective, but they obviously have a huge impact on an organization. And so thinking of a leader listening to this podcast, when do they have time to even have a self-assessment? How does that take place? What does that look like? Are they doing that at home in the evening? Are they shutting their door, putting a note on the door? Don't disturb me. I'm doing a self-assessment. Is there some tools? Mm-hmm. Can they Google something? Can they call you? What is it like? How does that work?
I'm going to be a little bit biased here, and I'm going to say get yourself a great HR person. A great HR business partner is always your partner in these situations. HR business partners, they wear many hats. They're usually your publicity person. They're usually your biggest cheerleader when you're pushing forward a new endeavor in the organization. But they should also be there to have conversations with you, real conversations, and ask you how you're doing consistently, because they also look at you as an employee of the organization. And there's different resources for HR professionals because they also need to feel that. But for the leader in the organization, you should have a great HR person that doesn't just have their hands in how the organization is doing and the health of the organizational culture, but the health of the leader in the organization. And if you don't have those resources or that budget to have a great HR person, get yourself a coach. For sure. A career coach is something that every leader needs. Beyond a mentor. Mentors are great. They're fantastic. I call it a wisdom circle. You always need that. But you need a coach. And as a leader, the further that you get in your career, the more that you need a coach to help you grow and help you understand what's going on and the challenges that you're facing at that moment. So I think there's many different avenues that you could take. It doesn't, always have to be just self-reflection at night or something like that. You can have conversations with people that you trust and make sure you're developing that community around you that can ensure you build the time for it.
Well, I think that you just said the word that is probably the thing that might resonate with most leaders is trust.
Yeah.
How do you have this conversation, an authentic, true conversation, self-assessment with someone? You've got to have trust with them.
Absolutely.
Because everything that comes out of your mouth could, affect everything in the organization.
Yes.
So interesting. You mentioned something, and I thought about CEO roundtables.
Mm-hmm.
There are different organizations in the community that organize CEOs, the peer-to-peer discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard stories of CEOs that started as a solo entrepreneur and a CEO roundtable with other like-minded, similar careered people. And many of them today that I can think there are 3 or 4 of them that are running multi-million-dollar companies. And they have said to me, I could have not gotten there without being a member of a CEO roundtable.
Absolutely.
Because when it came to insurance and financing and human resource issues, because of course they're a solo entrepreneur, they don't know anything. They're trying to recruit people, retain them, and you're just doing this alone. But when you can do it with a group of people that are also doing the same things, they have the same challenges, and they're growing together. And they were doing those assessments together.
Yes.
About each oneself. Really interesting. Okay, Evie, I love to read.
Yeah.
I love to listen. I don't know that I do as much reading anymore. But I've got like a classic book that I love and recommend to leaders. But in your career, do you have a classic book or podcast that you'd recommend that's a great leadership book?
I think anything by Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek. Simon is amazing.
He's incredible.
I love the way that he shows servant leadership, and he talks about servant leadership consistently, but not in the traditional way of servant leadership. I think he really does a good job of connecting it to the bottom line. So I love to read anything by Simon Sinek. And then a podcast, I would say, it depends. There's a lot of podcasts that are out there. I don't think there's anything specific. I love to listen to Beyond the To-Do List. I think he brings a lot of great guests onto the podcast that talk about these leadership topics, especially things that are trending, and different books that they write. A lot of them are topics about running an organization and employees and culture and things of that nature, but also about productivity. I'm, a super nerd when it comes to productivity, so I love to listen to that. I think that's what I would recommend: Simon Sinek and Beyond the To-Do List.
So right here in Gwinnett, we have the John Maxwell Global Learning Leadership Center. And I think like every 2 or 3 years, he has Simon Sinek in Gwinnett.
Wow.
I saw him at 12 Stone Church probably I think it was like maybe 2022.
Okay.
He's incredible.
Yes.
How smart is that guy?
Yes,
I
seriously.
mean, you're just like, I'm blown away every time.
Seriously.
Like every third thing he says, you could like quote and send it on Twitter.
Pretty much.
I
I
mean,
could watch that TED Talk on the how, why, over and over. The
do
golden
you-
circle, over and over again.
and you catch a new thing every time.
Every single
Yeah,
time.
it's really incredible. And then I had actually not heard Beyond the To-Do List.
Yeah.
Which is where people get stuck, right?
Yes.
They get stuck on their to-do list.
Yes.
And they're never working on big things like culture.
Right.
So that's I have my to-do list, and then I have a big idea list.
I love that.
And it's all just on my notes.
Yeah.
And because like you're in the most random place, you think of like a great idea.
Yeah.
That's not a to-do. It's
Right.
like you need to think more about this.
Right. What do you do with your big idea list? Do you bring it to your team?
No, because it's my idea list, and some of them are really crazy ideas. But
That's awesome.
I try not to overdo rolling out new things.
Right.
So I will bring 1 or 2 ideas to the leadership team.
Yeah.
I'll then I'll just test it with employees.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what do you think about this? This is something I'm kicking around.
Right.
Like I always speak provisionally,
Yeah.
like big ideas. I'm like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just asking your opinion. I'm not giving any direction. What do you think of this?
I love that.
And because people are like, okay, I'm afraid they're going to think the CEO just told me to do something.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just, I want the pulse of everyone, not just the leadership team.
Yes, and I love that. I love that because I think it's important for leaders to be transparent about who they are and what they're bringing to the table. Some leaders come into the organization to set certain things in order. Some leaders come into an organization and they're complete catalysts and they want to change everything. Some leaders are, coming to spark new ideas and spark some creativity. And I think if a leader knows that about themselves, the values that they bring as a leader, then they can then let their employees know, like, this is what I'm here for. I'm sharing these big ideas, but it's not for you to take action, just like you just said. And I think it's important for employees to understand that. But first, the leader needs to do a self-assessment and understand what kind of leader am I and what am I causing in this organization.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I feel better about what I'm doing. Well, I think this was amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time today. I learned so much and reinforced some things that I already felt good about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you too.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.